Alright, to go through your warm-ups, the first thing that I'm going to have you do is a little bit of self-myofascial release. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a lacrosse ball. I know I said tennis ball on the sheet, but it's actually going to be a lacrosse ball. And we want to pin it up against the wall so that we're going into our trapezius. Sometimes we have to move our head out of the way and move up and down the trapezius here and a little bit towards the back here. If you feel any numbness, tingling, or like you're actually on the bone of the spine, you want to get off of that point, and you want to move in a very, very slow glacial pace. If you go too quickly, you're going to excite the muscle spindles and actually cause the muscle to tense rather than to loosen up. We also want to go into the pec minor. So the scapula protrudes through your rib cage and comes out to on this side. The pec minor attaches to that and moves straight down here. So we want to kind of find that little divot in here and kind of press this into the wall and then just kind of hold. We don't really need to move very far to actually find this one. And it's not a particularly great big muscle, but a lot of times when we're having issues, especially since you've been showing some issues with external rotation on one side, I believe it was your left, that can sometimes be because the glenohumeral joint is not sitting correctly because we're kind of rolling forward. Sometimes that could be from using a mouse or sitting with one shoulder up on the couch or something like that. That's a habitual thing. Side sleeping can also affect that. So we want to release these two muscles that are going to be our predominantly active muscles that are causing that shoulder movement. We can work on a little bit of lateral stretch. So I'm thinking about depressing this shoulder down as I pull over on the head and holding nice and for about 20 seconds or so. We can also do the pec stretch where we put our elbow or arm in the doorway and kind of just push through a little bit just to get a little bit more pec stretch here. Usually that's really mostly going to be going into the pec major, which can be a contributing muscle when it comes to this forward shoulder roll. But in this case, since it is contributing, we can add that stretch if you would like to. So once we get through that, we're going to go through our YTYs. And again, this is going to be on the floor, belly down. All right, we did this one. And when we're in this position, we're going to be working a little bit more in external rotation. So I'm actually keeping my thighs off the ground, my chest off the ground, but just a little bit. I don't want to be really overarching up and creating too much extra tightness in the back, in my low back and whatnot. That can affect me later in the workout. So if you want to, you can touch thumbs down and rotate thumbs up. Boom, about 6 reps here. Then palms just straight out, boom, and hitting 6 reps here. When we come up here, we're going to go pinky out. So again, we can touch our pinkies down on the floor and then move pinkies out and try to be as high as you can. If you're way out here, you're not quite getting it quite right. So try to keep it as forward as possible. 2 times through, so that's going to be this position, this position, this position, back. That's once through, and then repeat. The next one is going to be a band, low external shoulder rotation. So we would take our band and anchor it wherever we want to. We generally going to be using a lighter band for external shoulder rotations. The muscles that we're working here are going to be very, very small. So we anchor it off. You can actually just hold it if you want to. You don't have an anchor. But again, if you can, hold a towel here and make sure that your elbow is pointed straight down. A lot of times, again, we have this tendency to migrate our shoulders around our body. We want to keep that elbow pointed straight down. The other thing that happens for some reason is people tend to project their hips forward. So I want you to go ahead and make sure that you're sitting a little bit into a squat and try to keep those hips pushed back. And then we're going to be here. If you have a handle, great. And I want to externally rotate with a little movement outward. And by holding a towel here, I'm trying to stop myself from letting my deltoids take over, right? So people have a tendency to kind of open up and get into this position. It's not quite the same movement. So I want to keep as little space here as possible, and holding onto a towel or something will actually tend to make that a little bit easier to watch that. All right, then we can move into dumbbell external shoulder rotations, especially since you have difficulty on one side getting enough external rotation here. Moving to a more open position will help you develop those muscles still. So normally I'll just put a finger or two, depending on how big the plate is, in the little middle here, and then hold my elbows up at a 90-degree position. Again, the further out the dumbbell is, the more heavy it's going to be in one way but not the other. In this case, I really want to have it, in this 90-degree bend here. So I'm here, and I'm just bringing it up. Be very careful. One tendency that you might have is as your arms go down, your shoulders might rise and roll forward. So I want to keep my shoulders back and down the whole time and actually start to think about opposition. So as this hand is going down, I want to be really thinking about opening up my chest and rolling my shoulders back. Otherwise, if I'm not thinking about that, I might start getting into that habit of letting my shoulders rise and roll forward. So if I'm thinking back and down and I'm actually looking up a little bit and puffing my chest out more as my arms go down, then I can actually maintain a good shoulder position. Now, for our lateral reaches, for this one, I'm trying to target kind of my thoracolumbar fascia, which is this big band of tendinous tissues right here in my low back, where my transverse obliques, transverse abdominis, and erector spinatus and all kind of feed into that, including my latissimus dorsi. Now, if I stand with my back in a rounded position here, or with a neutral arch, like what we normally have, I'm not quite lengthening those muscles all the way. So it's good to actually kind of go into a little bit of a posterior pelvic tilt here. So I'm tucking my tail like a scared dog a little bit to kind of flatten out that back. This puts those muscles in a more elongated position. Now, when I stretch to the side, I'm actually going to have a lot more stretch. I can feel it in my lats, I can feel it here, I can feel it a little bit in my multifidus, everything, right? So we're just doing a couple reaches here, trying to maintain as much of a flat back as possible, and also watching how much lean I'm getting. So I'm not kind of doing one of these things, I'm not reaching to the back. I want to keep myself nice and upright as I go into that stretch. Now for the transverse reaches, really all we're doing is we're just loosening up some of the synovial fluid that is a lubricant that's in the joints of your spine. So all we're doing, I'm not trying to force this, I'm not trying to go into a lot of rotational stretch here. I'm just getting some movement into that spine to release some of that fluid, give the joints a little bit extra lubrication. All right, now for my kneeling psoas stretch, I like this position with my knee on the floor with people a lot of times, because what happens, I'll go to this direction so you can see a little bit better, is that as I'm trying to project my hips forward, a lot of times people will bend this back knee and take tension off of their psoas and iliacus, right? So what I really want to do with this stretch is I want to push my belly in, I want to be as upright as possible, keep that leg as straight as possible, and project my hips forward, reach my arm over my head, and lean to the side. A lot of times people will just say you'll reach up and then open up. I find that actually loosens tension off the psoas. So if you're finding that you're bending that knee anyways, go ahead and drop it all the way to the floor. You're going to hit it exactly the same way. Once it's anchored to the floor, now I can project my hips forward, push that belly in, and oftentimes I find I get a lot deeper into this stretch right there. Okay? Now for your kneeling hamstring stretch, I'm going to put my fingertips on the ground. I'm going to glue my chest to my leg a little bit. I don't want to have too much of a round back, so sometimes you might find that you're coming off the ground. I just don't want any tension in my low back. You're not really going to hurt yourself, but I'm not really trying to keep my nose attached to my knee or anything like that. Instead, I want to actually try to engage my lower back musculature and then just back off that hamstring for half a second, return, boom, and return. All right. Now for the standing quad stretch, again, I want to keep my belly pushed in, so I'm nice and tight here. I'm going to point my knee straight to the ground and pull my heel into my butt. A lot of times when people tend to pull their leg forward, back like this, right, they're trying to pull out, you'll get more back arch. The rectus femoris, which is the muscle that we're really trying to stretch here, feeds up into your pelvis here. If you allow your back to arch too much, you're taking tension off that rectus femoris and putting extra tension in your low back. So by keeping my abs engaged and trying to keep my knee point straight down, I'm not getting my low back to arch at all, so I can actually hit that stretch a lot deeper. Now once you've got the upper engagement, you can start to pull back a little bit, but just make sure that we're not rounding our back to let that happen, right? It should just be, if I am pulling back at all, it's because I'm actually getting deeper into that stretch and I'm able to maintain up here. But most people can just pull their heel into the butt and they don't have to start trying to drive their knee back. All right, for the lateral calf stretches, what that means, we're going to do those in two positions. One, again, is with a bent knee. So I'm actually trying to project my knee down into the ground with my heel pushed down into the ground. I'm going to be pushing against the wall. Now I'm going to take my opposite leg and step across as I'm pushing into the wall here and then projecting down. It's okay if your heel comes up as long as you're driving that heel back down, right? And so what this is doing is it's putting a little bit of a twist into my hip and it's lengthening the musculature along the outside of my leg and my calf. I don't want to force it too much because I am adding a little bit of rotation into my knee and I want to be careful with that. So as I'm stepping across, I'm just trying to find that stretch. You can even make it more dynamic, right? So you can just swing and swing right into that stretch. Then we're going to do the same thing again. This time you should be able to keep your heel on the ground, keeping your legs straight, project your hips forward, push against the wall, and then step across and hold or swing your leg across. The reason why we're doing it this way is this musculature can tend to pull up on the heel right here, and it's going to cause the foot to flatten, especially if we have issues with flat feet in general, or if our knees start to cave in. Doing the stretch this way is actually going to help loosen that musculature so that we can actually start addressing that internal rotation of the knee and the flat feet. All right, and that is going to be your warm-up.